I'm going to call this meeting to order. I'm filling in for Mike Tony today. So if y'all please stand and join me in the pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order of business, approval of minutes, September 26th meeting. Any additions, subtractions, comments?
Just one change, the district island is actually descent island on page 2, or in the second paragraph. Otherwise, the movement further. I'll second.
Any other additions, corrections? I've done a little bit. Citizen comments. It's time for citizen comments on the subject not related to subject on the agenda. Okay, and let's move on to our agenda. First item for all business is an update on the single-use plastic survey. Juliana, environmental long-range planner for Beaufort County, is making our presentation. Welcome, and together.
Thank you, Chairman, or temporary. Good morning, all. As Mr. Thomas said, my name is Juliana Sadek. I'm the environmental long-range planner for Beaufort County, and it is my pleasure this morning, to give you all an update on potential amendments that the county is considering for our 2018 plastic bag ordinance and the survey results that we received that we ran in order to assess this issue. So we'll give everyone a chance. What I'm going to do this morning is I'm going to go through several reasons why it's important to consider waste reduction strategies for our region. I'm going to discuss what actions have been taken thus far. I'll go over some survey results from our surveys, and I will discuss the what that might mean for our amendments. So we'll get started. One of the biggest reasons it's important to consider ways to reduce waste is that our landfill's life is limited. It's not an infinite resource, and we do share it with Jasper County. It has 6 years currently left on it, and that is based on current rates of waste disposal. That does not take into consideration future rates as more and more people move to both Beaufort and Jasper County. So just flagging that for us all. In fiscal year 24, Beaufort County threw away almost just over 150,000 tons of municipal solid waste. So this is waste coming from homes, so residential, industrial, and commercial sources. That's where that's coming from. Only 12% of that tonnage was recycled. Now, for our plastic bag ordinance amendments, we are considering 5 unnecessary single-use plastic items. They are thick plastic bags, styrofoam cups, styrofoam takeout containers, plastic straws, and plastic utensils. None of these items are recyclable through traditional municipal solid waste avenues. So we can't increase recycling rates and education of these items and reduce them from the waste stream. And because they're single use, they have very limited lifetime in use, right? And then immediately go into our waste stream. So reducing them aligns with both state and county goals for solid waste management. Just as they impact our landfill, of course, they impact the quality of life we have here in our communities around us by appearing in our communities and our environment as litter. And the first 5 months of 2025, so that's this year, almost 200,000 pounds of litter were picked up by Beaufort County litter crews. That's not even halfway through the year. So we've got an issue with litter out there. Once in our environment, single-use plastics can present issues for other types of critical infrastructure, like our stormwater management systems, where they can cause clogs and reduce those systems' ability to appropriately process that water before discharging it into our marshes. And of course, these items can get out into our environment where they threaten the wildlife that we share our home with. So entanglement, entrapment, and starvation are all risks that litter pose to wildlife. And starvation is because sometimes our wildlife will eat these items instead of what they're supposed to, so that can end up killing them. Once the plastic items are out in the environment and exposed to the elements, they do begin to break down into something called microplastics when they get small enough. And at that size, they become a part of our food webs, unfortunately. They may unintentionally be taken up by all kinds of critters in our marine systems, and they have been found in foods that we enjoy eating here in the Low Country and that we have festivals celebrating. So shrimp, crabs, oysters, and fish have been found with microplastics in them, which means that they're in our bodies. So pretty much everywhere scientists have looked for microplastics in the human body, they have found them. They've been found in the brain, in our liver, our kidneys, our digestive tract. They've been found in urine, they've been found in blood, stool, breast milk, placentas, and they've been found in the first bowel movement that infants, newborns have in the first 24 hours of life, which means that these plastics are moving from our adults into our next generation. Now, the types of microplastics that are most commonly found in the human body are polyethylene-based and polypropylene-based. These are the plastics used to make thick plastic bags and used to make our plastic utensils and our plastic straws. Once in the human system, they are linked to higher rates of risk for cancers and diseases. So you are 4.5 times more likely to suffer a heart attack or stroke if you have microplastics in the plaque in your arteries. And they are finding it in the plaque in our arteries. So that is a real legitimate risk. Now, unfortunately, there's not really a way to globally manage this, and there have been efforts made, but they fail. So that's not a place that we're going to see any impact. We also aren't seeing any meaningful impact from the federal level across administrations. There have been attempts, but not necessarily meaningful action. Where we see the greatest impact is locally, and we know this because of the 2018 efforts with the plastic bag ordinance. And this is why council directed staff to investigate ways to improve and strengthen our 2018 ordinance. So last May, staff pulled together a multidisciplinary working group to look at this multifaceted issue. We have representation from several departments at Beaufort County, so it includes the Planning and Zoning Department, which I represent, as well as our Solid Waste Management Department, our Stormwater Department, and our Public Information and Accountability Department. We also have representation on this working group from the Keep Beaufort County Beautiful Board, who's on the front lines of litter pickups in our region, so they really know firsthand how these 5 unnecessary single-use plastics are showing up in the environment. We have representation from the Coastal Conservation League, who really helped to lead the 2018 effort with the plastic bag ordinance. And then we have representation from the Port Royal Sound Foundation, who is heavily invested in the health of the Port Royal Sound, and that system has an impact on everyone living in Beaufort County. So what we did is we dug into the issue and started looking at ways to understand how our community may feel about regulating the 5 single-use plastics that we're considering. So again, that's thick plastic bags, styrofoam takeout containers, styrofoam cups, plastic straws, and plastic utensils. We talked with other communities up the coast to learn how they approach this, and one thing that we heard from them was that a survey can be really helpful in helping to understand what your community wants. So we decided to take that route. The working group developed 2 different survey types, one for businesses and one for residents, because we understand that 2 different groups are going to have experience the impacts differently if a regulation goes into place. And our surveys assess regulatory preferences of these 2 audiences, and I'll get into that here in just a moment. The surveys ran from January 13th to April 3rd, so just under 3 months, and it was really, really important to us that we got as many responses to the surveys as possible. So we undertook what we thought to be a robust media and outreach campaign. We worked with our public information office to get stories out to our newspapers, which was run through several times. We had social media outreach campaigns. We had email blasts amongst all of the partners and the county several times. We had partnerships working with business associations, both north and south of the Broad, as well as chambers of commerce, so that their memberships would be notified about the survey opportunity, so we could really capture the business perspective. And we also printed the postcards that you see here specifically for businesses and took them door to door in the business centers of our county. So several of our working group members did that work in order to capture, again, as much business input as we could as possible. And the last thing we did was we printed flyers and had them put up at our local libraries to help capture even more. So we tried to lead as many horses to water as possible, and we feel like a lot of horses drank that water because we ended up with 6,200 responses total across both surveys in just under 3 months. So that was a really, really surprising number, and I think indicates that there's a lot of interest in this issue throughout the region. Now on the screen here, you can see a breakdown of the geographic region from which our respondents came from. And we saw across both surveys a pretty even distribution. So we had about a third of our respondents coming from the Hilton Head Island Defusky area, a third coming from the Bluffton Okatee area, and just over a third coming from the northern Beaufort County area. And this really reflects population trends in our region, and it signifies to us that there's a regional consensus on what's to be done with these 5 single-use plastics represented in our survey results. So let's get into it. One of the questions we asked both residents and businesses was, how supportive are you of a complete ban, and we put complete ban in all caps so that it couldn't be missed in that question, of each of these items. And so they could vote about their support or opposition for each item. And what we found, and we're really interested to see, was how strongly supported taking ban action on each 5 items is supported by our residents. You can see that it is the large majority here. Now, because I knew I was talking to our northern Beaufort County folks today, I pulled out just the northern Beaufort County responses so you could see how these trends track here. And for our residents, it pretty much mirrors that county-wide trend that we saw. So support across the board for taking action on all 5 of these items. Our businesses felt similarly as well. So we do see majority support for a complete ban on all 5 items. The biggest difference here is for our plastic utensils and plastic straws. There are higher rates of opposition than we saw with our residents. So that's starting to show us that maybe bans aren't going to be what everybody wants to see necessarily for every single one of these items. So we may need to take different tactics for different items. And then I pulled our northern Beaufort County businesses, and we do see similar trends. We have that majority support here for our bags and our styrofoam containers. But when it came to plastic utensils and plastic straws, we're seeing much higher rates of opposition for complete bans. So again, really reinforcing that we may need to take different types of action for different types of items. Fortunately, we asked our survey respondents what regulatory action they thought was most appropriate for each item. So they had 4 choices to choose from. One of them was none of these, no regulatory action, so taking no action. By request, so that's in the peach. By request only is the dark blue. And that basically means that these items are still available, but you don't automatically receive them. So a good example is if you go to a restaurant and you order a drink, a straw doesn't automatically come in that cup. You have to ask for it. So that's what by request only is. Customer fee means that a fee is implemented for these items if you want them to help dissuade customers from using them. And then a ban is, of course, completely eliminating the items at the point of sale and replacing them with alternatives, typically eco-friendly alternatives. Going with that. What we found is that there is interest in regulation for all 5 items. Nowhere do you see no action being the one that went out for any of these 5 items. For plastic bags, styrofoam containers, and styrofoam cups, bans were the most preferred. But when it came to our plastic utensils and our plastic straws, we start to see that by request only regulation come out on top. Of course, it's a little bit evenly split there on plastic straws. But again, this kind of links back to those opposition and support levels for complete bans on those items as well. So that tracks. The least popular item across the board, or least popular type of regulation, was customer fee, which is no surprise there. For northern Beaufort County residents, pretty much mirrors what we saw for the entire county as far as their preferences go. Bans for the first 3, and maybe our by request only is going to be the better option for the plastic straws and plastic utensils. For businesses, we also saw these similar responses countywide. So bans came across the board as the most preferred action for plastic bags and the styrofoam items. And then by request only for plastic utensils. Interestingly, businesses were more supportive of bans on straws than they were for by request only. So it's interesting to see that difference there. We have a little bit of disagreement between our residents and our businesses on how to.
Just, you look at my calendar
But
real
when we
quick.
take a
November
look
3rd
at
4
Northern,
o'clock.
when we take a Northern Beaufort County business
Stand by,
preference,
please.
we're seeing essentially the same thing here as well. And still noting
Yeah, I
that
can be
plastic
there.
straws, just by a minor amount, have bans as the higher preference. But essentially mirrors what we've seen. So these are the kind of the results we're getting on what types of action to take. And this reflects here. For someone online, you might need to mute yourself.
Is there any way to send him on?
He has to mute himself, doesn't he? Yes, I think he has to mute himself. Yeah. That's okay.
That's nasty.
Thinking ahead, but you guys
Hey,
are.
Colonel Guy. Can you mute yourself?
There we go.
Okay.
Keyboard.
Pause. We mostly hit the meat of the presentation anyway.
Green space.
Right.
And they all their green space back. It was
Yeah.
Whoever's controlling the computer there should be.
Okay. Okay, so this is November 3rd, 4 p.m.
Okay.
The county building.
I control just him here. Oh, can anybody, there
There we go.
On text.
Sorry about that. Thank you.
On text.
Good job.
I text somebody. I got the message. Yeah.
The blue. Thank you. All right, woohoo.
Then I was on delay, so I didn't quite get that.
All right, so that was a nice intermission for us all. The results of our survey really reflect trends up and down the coast of South Carolina. So all 5 of these items have been considered or are being considered in some form or fashion by communities to the north of us, and most of them are taking action on them, including by request only regulation for disposable cutlery. And any action we take, what this means is that it would be amplified. Oh, yeah, thank you. That's okay. It would be amplified by their action if we take action on these items, because of course our waters really know no differences.
Good start of the show, buddy.
Humbling, right? Okay. We also heard concerns from our council members as well as the survey respondents about the cost to transition away from traditional plastics to more eco tableware. And so the committee, or our working group rather, took this very seriously because of course we don't want to overburden anyone if we take on any regulatory action. We are thinking about those unintended consequences. And we did some research into the differences between traditional plasticware versus eco tableware. And we found that it's really only pennies difference when it comes to these types of cutlery and tableware. So circled, I have the most expensive difference here on this chart. So for your traditional plastic compartment clamshell, so your takeout container, you have 0.05, so 5 cents for traditional plastic. When it comes to the eco tableware, bagasse, I think that's how you say that, but that's made out of sugarcane, leftover sugarcane plant fibers, at most 3 pennies difference, so 0.08 is the most expensive end of that item there on this chart, and showing you those differences. So it is going to be a small increase in price for some of these items if we completely ban them. Another thing to take into consideration though is that there are those long-term cost savings by reducing waste in our region. So of course we could prolong the life of our landfill if we're reducing the amount of waste that's going to it. We can support the lifetimes of our stormwater systems and reduce the need for our litter crews to be out so often. And of course those health impacts that we may be experiencing from microplastics could potentially be reduced by taking action on unnecessary single-use plastics. We were also really interested to know whether or not by request only regulation is effective. Does this work? And so we found a case study in Red Bank, New Jersey that happened just this past year where they implemented only for takeout orders a by request only ordinance. And for takeout orders specifically, they were saying that cutlery and condiments were only to be given out if a customer requested them. Within the first year, they found that businesses who were in compliance, they did a survey of them, said that only 6% of their customers were requesting these items, which means that 94%, there was a 94% reduction in the number of people walking away from these businesses with cutlery and condiment packets. For the cutlery alone, that equated to over 1.5 million of unnecessary single-use plastic cutlery pieces being removed from the waste stream, which equated to over 10,000 pounds of waste. That's just 16 restaurants, and that's just plastic cutlery. So think what could happen here, right? With the many more restaurants we have, and taking into consideration that we would like to consider this for straws. And that also means they don't have any numbers about the amount of money saved there, but that means a reduced need for stock because you're not giving these things out all the time. So the recommendations of our survey are pretty clear across the board for residents and businesses. They want us to eliminate and replace styrofoam takeout containers, styrofoam cups, and the thick plastic bags. And they'd like to see by request only ordinances in place for plastic cutlery and plastic straws, recognizing that there is a time and a place where you may need these things. Also note, by request only doesn't mean that you have to get rid of the plastic items. It just means you're not giving them out all of them. So next steps. Right now, we are going on a roadshow, letting all of our previous partners in the 2018 plastic bag ordinance know about our intentions and the steps we've taken to understand how we might amend our ordinance. We want feedback from you all. So our municipal partners, we definitely want to know what considerations we need to take in when we are working on our amendment language, as well as our implementation program. And of course, we would really, really hope for a unified effort throughout the county, because if only Beaufort County is making the amendments to the plastic bag ordinance, it really has a limited effect, especially considering that our business centers are in our municipalities, and that's where we're going to see the greatest impact on waste reduction of these unnecessary single-use plastic items. So I'm in the early stages of that road show. I'll be going all throughout the county, and I will be making contact with Jasper County as well to just see if they're interested in learning about this and if this is something that they may like to take on. Once we finish that, we'll start to develop our amendment language, so that'll take into consideration the survey results and feedback we get from municipal partners. And then we'll begin working on that implementation plan. And the implementation plan is going to have, we're already starting a list of what we'd like to include. The county is developing a green business program, so we'd like to tie that in. We are starting our pilot composting program, so we'd like to incorporate that. And we'd also like to develop kind of a grant resource base for any businesses that need financial aid in transitioning away from traditional plastic items that end up being banned, and as well as creating education, outreach, and training programs to help businesses through that transition. So those are all things that we're considering now, but of course we are open for more ideas on that as well. I did cite all of the sources that were used in creating this presentation. So if you are like me and you want to get into the nitty-gritty of these details, you can. So please feel free to do that. I also linked to our overall survey results. We have a final report on it that talks about the other questions that were asked and the data that came out from those. So if you're interested in seeing that, you may. Those other questions were really about behavior. How much are you receiving these items? What are you doing with them after you receive them? If you're a business, how many of them are you giving them out today? And so with that, I will take questions if there are any. Yes, sir.
Landfill, you said had 6 years left?
Yes, sir.
The current rate. Are there plans for another landfill at some point?
There are plans to expand the landfill. And so I believe Hickory Hill landfill is getting permitted for an expansion that will give it 15 years. But again, that's based on today's rates of waste disposal. So when you take into consideration all of the approved units in our neighboring county, Jasper County, and any growth we see in Beaufort County, it's not taking those future rates into consideration. So 15 years isn't quite what it's gonna be. Now, as far as a new landfill being sited, looking at the state's maps of where landfills are and the regulations for siting them, I'm not sure that there would be one, that we could have a new one nearby. We'd have to export our waste to a landfill that had capacity, so there would be increased costs
A
associated
little
with that.
further upstate,
Yes,
and with Jasper County going the way it is,
Yes.
I don't think you're gonna get it.
yeah, and Jasper, I was interested to see what their rate of waste disposal are, and for their fiscal year 24, it was just over 30,000 tons, far less than what Beaufort County is doing, but of course, they're not quite as grown up as Beaufort County. Their recycling rates were about 5% of that municipal solid waste.
Also, on the by request only, is that gonna be initiated by the customer? Every restaurant I go into, they ask me about one.
That's
I
great,
tell them no.
yeah.
Really.
So will it be an issue for the customer?
Well, in other words, if the business doesn't ask you if you want, if the customer has to ask for them, I think that's gonna reduce the fee.
Yes, absolutely. And in Charleston County, in the city of Charleston, what they did was they actually created little informational pamphlets that they had businesses display front and center for their customers to see, that basically said, it's not our fault that we're not giving you a straw automatically, it's the government's fault. So that could kind of, take the blame off of them and help customers understand what was going on.
We put Mayor Crum's face on that.
Sure. Yes, Councilman.
Where did you pull the data from for the replacement cost on that? The comparison?
That came from, let's see, I'm gonna move down to that slide.
And the reason I asked, I went through with a few business owners with the larger companies that they have contracts with,
Mhm.
and the cost is actually 3 to 4 times higher.
And we also worked with, I believe it was the Marriott Hilton Head, and the Port Royal Sound Foundation did the legwork on that for us. So it's BioLeader, as you can see here, it's the fact from the 2025 analysis for the cost of traditional versus eco-friendly tableware. So if you take a look at that, it is global prices, so that we may see a difference here. And then, like I said, we worked with the Marriott as well to understand where they're getting theirs from and what differences they're seeing. So we could use that information if that's.
Yeah, like I said, the companies around here that they're in contract with for their supplies, it was 3 to 4 times higher.
Okay,
Could you provide that to me?
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
would be great. That would be very helpful.
Yeah, during my leadership youth class, one of the groups did a study on what percentage of actual recyclables actually are recycled.
Mhm.
And we found out that it was a fairly low rate
Yeah.
because something could be in that recyclable large bin that would contaminate and cause it all to go to the refill. Are you thinking of programs to try to educate the citizens so that we don't have this large, waste of recyclables?
Yes, so we have Victoria Hoffman on staff in our solid waste department who works really hard on education outreach for what types of things can be recycled, what can't. Now, of course, we have kind of purview over our convenience centers. We're not working with a hauler, so our municipalities are working with the haulers, which I reap the benefit of living in a municipality. And all of those recycling bins come with information on them about what can go in and what can't. So I think again, it's more outreach can definitely be done and more education, but it's also a leading horse to water type thing. So if we can address where those items end up in the user's hands, as well as where they might are being sourced from, I think that's a twofold strategy to help really reduce unnecessary items.
We go to First Watch, probably too much, but we go there a lot. They charge if you get a takeout.
Okay.
It's a set fee. So they're charging you for, even if you tell them you don't want the plastic,
charge you.
they still, I guess they're charging for the bag and now they use the containers that are paper, or whatever that's called.
And if you use a credit card.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they already charge.
Everywhere.
Everywhere does that.
Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts? Yes, Mr. Rogers.
Do you have an anticipated time frame for the implementation of the amendment? And as part of this would be, is there going to be an enforcement procedure or process? I mean, how do you want to know it's working?
Right, so for your first question, we anticipate being through the roadshow by the end of the year, essentially, and then we can start looking at drafting amendment language starting in 2026. So, and again, I want municipal input on that. We don't want to just go through without collaborating. As far as enforcement goes, it's really going to be kind of we've done it originally through our building codes. That's where we get for our code enforcement rather, that's where we have enforcement now for the single-use thin plastic bags. But in order for them to recognize that that's happening, we need community members to be letting them know and reporting that. And I think it's a letter initially is what they received to let them know about the ordinance, and then I'm not sure what happens after that, so I can dig into that.
I think, the first go around, some of y'all may remember, we kind of gave a grace period because we wanted to give them time to get rid of,
Transition.
to fully transition, so it wouldn't be a business transition. And I'll just say it, I've said it publicly, I'm really disappointed in Harris Teeter that they chose not to comply.
Yeah.
They went right away because I've been at other Harris Teeters where they only use the paper bags, but I don't know, that's the city of Beaufort, because the way our ordinances are written, they didn't have to.
Right,
They could use a plastic bag.
yes, they are in compliance with those thick plastic bags. And that's really what initiated this, right? Why we're even looking at making amendments to the ordinance is those thick plastic bags. And our survey comments, that came up repeatedly, specifically calling out big box stores by name, both from our residents and our businesses who are upset by those thick plastic bags. So you're not alone in that. That is a very common trend that we saw in the comments.
I will say, I'm not opposed to looking at the language. I think the intent is great, but seeing the plastic bag ban from 18 actually is making it worse in my mind. There's no enforcement really as it stands right now. I personally would like to see a larger green initiative and incentivize the behavior rather than using the police powers to ban. I think we're going to get more compliance if we incentivize the business through a reduction on their business license if they can comply and make it across the board, not just focus on plastics.
Right, yes. And
I don't want y'all to think I'm not for this. I think we need to work in that direction. I'm just opposed to using the government power to ban and interfere with business.
very much.
When we first started the plastic ban, I know local Walgreens that I go to, it was just a matter of awareness, and they did it right away. No more plastic bags, no more thin plastic bags. And they went to paper or bring your own. So I think most of the businesses be cooperative.
And I hope the green business program that the solid waste department's developing will be helpful in that more holistic.
Yes.
What's the most recyclable, material? And the reason I asked that is I always thought cardboard was a big thing. Every pizza box I've ever gotten is contaminated.
Yes, it's
You
contaminated,
gotta
yes.
check.
That's right. So as far as an item that can be repetitively recycled over and over and over and over, that's going to be your aluminum cans. They can go forever, essentially. I think the most commonly, and I thought I heard whispers in the crowd, but I would go with the cardboard being the most commonly recycled and probably the most commonly received for a lot of us, right? Especially with ordering online. But I don't know for sure. I'm speculating. That is just me making a guess. Sorry, Wendy, and then I'll ask you something over.
Anticipating starting the composting and where.
Do y'all know that?
I think they're gonna do it at the drop-off points first.
Yes, I think there's a couple of convenience centers that are gonna be collecting the compost materials, and then those, I believe, have to be transported to the location of where our composting unit is. But Victoria Hoffman is going to be your point of contact on that. She is spearheading that. We're so lucky to have her. It's really exciting. Yes, Councilman Glover.
I think when we did the first one, we had a few exemptions, particularly with agriculture and
Yes.
fishing.
Yes.
Yeah, so I hope we will continue to do that.
Yes, and we even saw in the comments in the survey responses, particularly from businesses, concerns from nonprofits who have to use these items for one reason or another. And I know in previous iterations, nonprofits were exempted as well. So there will be exemptions, and we'll get into those details when we start drafting those amendments. But of course, welcome feedback on where that may be appropriate. Any other questions for me this morning? Okay. Thank you. Thanks, you all. Sorry to see my comments.
I don't have a computer.
I just like, I met, I just listened to this group's meetings, they did a lot of hard work. Whole project, I'd like to brag on Julie and the group.
Thank you, Brianna. Very good. Okay, second item we had up discussion was an update on the Northern Beaufort Transit Master Plan. And I guess Rachel, take care of this.
Good morning, everyone. That's a tough act to follow, so I'm gonna have to be really spirited to keep your attention. Thank you all for having me back for a second time. Rachel Hatcher with RSNH. I'm really proud to be supporting the Low Country Council of Governments as well as Palmetto Breeze in developing your Northern Beaufort Transit Master Plan for all of the areas and communities north of the Broad. If you'll click for me, we're gonna do it this way on my presentation. So I know there's been a lot of information shared with you all, both from serving on our stakeholders committee, seeing information in the public, and our last presentation. But we've done a lot of work since y'all saw us last. So we're going to give you a status update and recap on the things that you saw in your previous meeting very briefly, because we really want to get to the meat of the presentation today, which is the study recommendations that are in draft final report format and out to the public for comments starting next week. So we have some implementation strategies that I think you'll be excited to see with some preliminary bottom line. What will this cost us and what will this cost our community? And then next steps and discussion. You all are a unique board for us because you are about implementation. And I want to start before we get into this presentation with challenging you all to see the benefits for your community and recognizing that implementation does not happen without local partnerships. They are critical. Without those local dollars, without those local champions and commitments, this is just a really nice plan. Next slide. So going back to the idea of a transit master plan, why are we studying it? What are we doing here? It really boils down to three basic questions. What do we need? Why do we need it? And how are we going to deliver that? Next slide. So the various components of the process, I love this graphic because it demonstrates the 12-month process in a really short and condensed way. But background and introduction, introducing ourselves to the community, building some trust and conversations, sometimes very difficult conversations, while gathering information both from those conversations as well as from data, so that we can understand the existing conditions that the community is facing, as well as some of the things on the horizon. Setting with you all some missions, goals, and objectives, and understanding through community involvement what we're trying to accomplish. And a really great example of that is if you say, I would really love to improve traffic. Traffic is a problem, but your number one investment is to go as far out into the community as possible to pick up those that don't have vehicles. You're not incentivizing a reduction in traffic because now you're not providing a service for those that have a vehicle and find it convenient to use a vehicle. So aligning those goals and objectives in a way that serves all of those objectives in a very concise way, using your resources to serve both those who don't have a vehicle and those that do and need to have a choice incentive. So that falls into your transit needs. What are your needs? Why are you choosing that vehicle over another mode of transportation? Could it be one of those tools in your toolbox? As well as for those obviously who don't have a method of transportation or are aging into needing support. Scenarios and alternatives. As you'll recall in your last meeting, we showed you 4 different alternatives where we heard the community, we saw the data, and we created essentially a very sophisticated connect the dots program. If we're going to be connecting these dots in very sophisticated ways, what do these dots need in order to be incentivized to ride? And what do these dots need in order to be incentivized to ride? And where are they going? We tested 4 separate alternatives to see which one was most cost effective and which one has the greatest return on that investment in ridership as well as efficiency. So we have moved forward with recommendations on, I'll share with you, alternative number 4 was the most successful. So we went through lots of iterations to get to that most successful one to move forward for your final recommendations as well as its implementation strategy. So we are approaching the end of the process. Next slide. A lot more detail, but essentially this was a 12-month process and we are in the final 2 months, which you see in the corner, which is sharing the draft recommendations with you all as well as the public. And then we'll be moving forward with final presentations and adoption in November and December. Next slide. This is a very short section. We are currently collecting information from the public. If you'll go to the next one for me. We have been rolling out in-person events. My personal favorite, aside from y'all's first presentation, was Green Drinks. We really enjoyed being in the community and hearing a lot of fantastic feedback. And we absolutely adjusted routes and the way that we share information based on the feedback we received at that meeting. So we will be rolling out our next in-person event at First Friday, November 7th. We really hope you all will come out and join us. And if you can't join us, please make sure other people know that have a vested interest in transit that will be there. We'll be sharing information, but having some interactive exercises so they can tell us what their most important, highest priority selection is for what we would roll out potentially first and what they'd be likely to use. And then, of course, always important information distribution. Y'all had a fantastic presentation that she shared the information about why it's important and making sure the community gets the why this is important, even if transit is not their preferred method of transportation, will be critically important to implementation support. Next slide. So we're going to go through strategies and alternatives. And again, this is a recap from your previous presentation. Go to the next. So we had a lot of strategies that we rolled out and shared with you all and explained at your last meeting. And some of those are going to be transportation or transit related, where you're used to seeing things like the bus coming to a stop. That is the traditional method of transit, and it still certainly plays a role in this community. But that particular type of transportation is only appropriate if you have supporting infrastructure like sidewalks, if you have nearby origins and destinations with enough density to support it, meaning enough humans live in one area and enough humans are trying to get to another area, that a percentage of those will be a good investment by this community. If you do not have sufficient population and sufficient destination densities, you will be wasting your taxpayers' dollars running that method of transportation out there. So we took that very seriously in this community because that is the most commonly understood method of transportation is fixed route. There are also circulators that are not meant to collect people in the same way. They're meant to move people really fast once they get to where they're going in that really core destinations. Very different methods of a fixed route system. Microtransit, you have a cell phone, you call Uber or Lyft. This is the public transit version of that. So in very broad areas where you maybe don't have as dense a population, if you were to run a line down the center of a roadway and you only see one or two houses, that's not efficient for them. So using something like microtransit that can deviate and move through those smaller back roads to pick up in areas where there are clusters of people that need to go somewhere that's more rural, microtransit is the more appropriate method. Go even more rural and dial a ride is most appropriate because then you get 24-hour advanced reservation requirements where you can cluster as many trips and schedule them as efficiently as possible. And then, of course, seasonal shuttles, we've worked all that in. We know that we live in a very wonderful place to visit, and our community also wants to enjoy those resources. So making sure we cost that in so that it's part of your overall transportation solutions. There are also supporting strategies, which are really important, almost as important as running the service itself, because you do have a fantastic Spanish Moss Trail that you can use as a resource and leverage that to get people to a bus stop, and they never have to get in a car at all, and they can enjoy that both as a recreation opportunity, but also as a transportation solution. Bike share has a really strong place in your community where you can have folks moving from one method of alternative transportation to the other, and they don't need to bring that vehicle out at all for their daily trip. Bike and pet intensive corridors, making sure that if someone owns a bicycle and that's their primary method of transportation, they can use that and use the bus as a connector for that mode. Van pool programs, you'll hear more about that in our personas as we walk through them. Van pool is a fantastic and highly flexible tool for those folks in the community that said, we need help with transportation to work. We need to get our folks broader and greater access to the areas where they want to work. And we have really great regional shuttles that do that, but they don't go everywhere and they can't go everywhere. So a very scalable solution to additional transportation for employment purposes. And then I know y'all love this one, and we do have a scenario for it, future ferry. We need to show how the system could support ferry services in the community. And then, of course, all of the infrastructure strategies, which we won't talk as great detail about today, but if you can't house the vehicle somewhere, if you can't maintain the vehicle somewhere, and if folks can't, if they are bringing a car in, park it somewhere and board a vehicle, then you will not have a successful tourism-based transit system or reduce the vehicles that are circling downtown. Any questions about these? Because we're going to go more rapidly through the scenarios after that. Okay, next slide. So now we're going to, the highlight of the show, the recommendations. Next slide. So the recommendations include a lot of solutions that are carefully crafted for the areas in the community where we heard from the public and the stakeholders that there was extreme interest, and we saw the data support that. That includes 3 fixed routes that are operating on 30 to 60-minute headways, with Reba Road being the fastest of those 3, and the other 2 are being on the outsides that will be collectors that will bring folks into that Reba Road core. 1 downtown Beaufort circulator that could be seasonal or all year round. We have costed it as all year round. A seasonal beach shuttle that would take you out to Hunting Beach and the surrounding area with 5 stop locations. Micro transit service zones located, I won't get too close because I know it's sensitive here and here. Again, those are those use your cell phone within 20 minutes, a vehicle will arrive at your origin and drop you off at your destination. 1 dial-a-ride zone, which is the northern portion of the study area, which is certainly too rural for the other solutions currently, but in the future, the infrastructure that you're building could of course expand into that area as it goes. 1 dial-a-ride, 4 mobility hub super stops. And we're going to show you, we actually did some test fits on properties in the area to show what type of super stops you would need in order to have multiple vehicles staging and picking up and dropping off at these key transfer locations. And then we do have the requirement for 1 maintenance and storage facility. You have to be able to securely store these vehicles in the evening. 1 bike share system with 5 locations, 1 employment van pool program, and 2 future connections to ferry service. And those are all shown on the map here where they are appropriate. Next slide. A little bit of additional detail. We won't go into great explanation on this slide, but this is providing you with how many vehicles each would require, what those peak headways are, meaning if you're standing at a stop, how frequently will you see a vehicle go by. The days of service, and you'll see that it does vary by each of those scenarios or recommendations, but generally Monday through Saturday for the traditional bus facilities, and then all week long for the downtown circulator, so that we can try to get folks out of their vehicles and stop clogging up Carteret and the surrounding area. And then we did have those micro transit zones and the 24-hour advance reservation operating at the same schedule as the fixed route, which is a federal requirement. Next slide. So a little additional glimpse of our transit supportive infrastructure. We have more graphics like this in the draft report, but mobility hubs and super stops are important for the success of the system. We are not recommending these on day 1. The service would roll out, but showing how it could fit within your community and how it could support those recommendations. What you would see in the year 1 rollout would be the use of existing infrastructure. We're very careful to recommend services and systems that work with what you have today, but then demonstrating how you could evolve into a stronger support infrastructure program. For example, this is in downtown Beaufort. This is essentially an empty lot. We laid it out to protect the existing oak trees, which you can't totally see in this view. It's a county-owned parcel, and we're showing a significant amount of area for bike share, some parking, room for the shuttles to pull in and charge, because we're recommending electric vehicles, so we're not contributing to air pollution in the downtown while they are circulating on 10 to 15-minute headways, and then other amenities for those that are using micromobility as a solution. And electric vehicle charging for the public as well if they're in those parking spaces. This location is in the Beaufort Town Center. We've got Food Lion up north. This is the bank. So you have the opportunity for a super stop location here, which would be short term, and the potential, it's a test fit. We know that there's lots of steps between a test fit and procurement and construction, but the nearby property that's not developed shows something like a small urban transfer center where you could pull the vehicles in, you could get information for the public, and have greater amenities for them. So this test fit can fit on other parcels, but just demonstrating it so that you could see 2 nearby. So all the potential services that you can include in a mobility hub, You'll hear me talk about mobility hubs a lot. It is critical infrastructure so that folks know how to approach the system, that they can make park and ride transfers, and they know where to go to transfer to these other services where they all connect. It also serves as park and rides, which are important for that regional service connection. And our bike share stations and our services leverage the Spanish Moss trailheads. We are trying very hard to integrate with that so folks don't have to get in their vehicle to access it, and where possible, we can leverage that for ridership. Any questions about mobility hubs? All right, next slide. Policies, you all love policies, you all are policy makers and enforcers. So there are some that will make the system more successful and some that will really essentially be required for the service to thrive. Transit-oriented development is really important, and looking at developers as they're coming in and developing these high-density locations, making sure that they recognize the importance of a vehicle being able to access that property. There's a lot of very simple design solutions. If you do it with transit in mind, you'll have a much more successful opportunity to service that high-density residential location. Transit access, easement, and facility ordinances. If you have a new development and they don't have it on the checklist during the rezoning or during the preliminary platting process, then you're going to miss the opportunity to say, I can't get a bus in here. I need to be able to service this area because it's on my transit line. Oh, this is on a future transit line. This will be important. So making sure that not only the ordinances are adjusted, but also the review process is adjusted for your community so that you can catch it early and you can communicate it early and demonstrate to your development community that this is important and it becomes part of your oversight process. And it does lead to access easements, saying if you don't have the access easement in place before they develop and you don't catch it early, then you have to ask for permission to enter the property after, and you don't always get it. So if we say, Walmart, can I come on your property? You may not get a yes, but if you say you want to develop a Walmart in my community, we must have transit access. You don't have to go back and ask for it after the fact. Very, very important piece. Marketing and public information. We won't go into significant detail about this, but anything you roll out that's new must be communicated to the community. And if everyone's doing it in a positive manner, it will be more successful. So making sure they get that information repetitively, they understand how to use it, they understand how it benefits them, even if they're not a rider. And then conducting rider training, making sure that particularly our vulnerable and senior communities have the opportunity to get on a bus, learn how to use the app, and learn this new mode of transportation in the community. Super important for the success of a rollout of a system. And then making sure that all of our services are approachable. We all love our cell phones, making sure the information is accessible to them so they know in real time when vehicles are coming. We have accessibility and equity options at each of those information collection zones, and that we're providing shade and safety and comfort. And that was actually shared to us in one of the primary goals. We just want this thing to be safe. We don't want to have folks coming in here, coming into our communities and creating an unsafe environment for us. There's a lot of fear associated with that. Next slide. So this is my favorite part of the presentation. We're going to take various constituents from your community that are target audiences that we heard both from public and stakeholder involvement, but also from our key stakeholders about those that we're trying to serve and those that are most important for us to remember when we're designing this system. And we're going to talk about their backstories and how they're going to use this system to solve their daily transportation issues and challenges. So our first is a family of 6, but they only have one vehicle. They're living at Laurel Bay, and mom takes the car to work at the air station, but dad is lucky he gets to work from home, but unlucky in that he's got 4 kids and he has to try to figure out how to get them around town when they have to make daily trips when mom has the car. Our next local community member is a student, and he has no vehicle. His bicycle is his primary mode of transportation. He lives with his family in Shell Point. And while the bicycle has worked for him in the past, he's now trying to get out further, like going to the campus downtown. And he's a faster method of transportation. It's taking him too long to get to places, and it's uncomfortable in the hot and rainy times of year. Our next group, we've got a lot of local residents that are commuting to work, and they're commuting regionally and not just the local trips. They commute to Savannah and Hilton Head daily. Traffic is just getting worse. They're sitting in traffic for longer and longer periods of time, so they're away from their family for longer periods of time, and the cost to maintain their personally owned vehicle is rising and becoming unsustainable for them. Our second to last group were active seniors with limited mobility. They live in different areas of the county, but they love Wednesday Bridge at the downtown library. They're not able to drive, but they want to remain independent. So they're looking for transportation solutions to help them there so they don't become a perceived burden on those that are helping them by driving them to those locations. And then our last fella here, he's a local teen with no driver's license, and he's enjoying summer break and loves surfing, but his parents have the vehicles for work and they're not willing to let him use that during the day. He's trying to avoid getting bored and up to no good. Keeps hearing it from folks in the community. So he's looking for transportation to help him get some recreation and outlets for fun during the day. So we're going to go into each of these and I'm going to show you how to use the system for each of their needs. Go to the next slide. All right. So the Jones-Ortiz family. Ashley has the car for the day. So Mr. Jones-Ortiz is ready to take the kids and he needs to get to Walmart. The nearby Food Lion from home is not going to have the things that he needs for the day. They've got to have a broad trip. They could typically walk to their closest grocery store, but now they're going to need transit. So he's determined that he's in the micro transit zone. So he's going to take micro transit with his kids to the local Walmart. And he does that by, at 9:30 a.m., grabbing his phone and scheduling his trip on the microtransit app. He did that at 9:40. By 9:55, he's arrived at Walmart. The vehicle pulled up to his house. It drove him directly to Walmart with the kids and let them off at the front door. He does his shopping, and at 10:45, he rehails the microtransit using the same app. It's there within 20 minutes, and they've completed their trip by 11:05, and they are back home with their groceries. Microtransit is a shared trip service, so you would need to let the dispatchers and the app know that you would have multiple riders, but they would be bringing you to your home location or within one block of your destination. Recognizing that Laurel Bay is gated, there would need to be agreements whether or not that's at the front gate or at the front door. Some really great statistics about this. 15 to 20 minutes is typically the range, but the faster it is, the more you pay. So you can control the costs by saying we want to have 30-minute headways or 1 hour headways. You typically see about 15 to 20 minutes. They are vans. They're much smaller, so they're more nimble. They can get in and out of these areas that don't have the more robust transportation network. And they're very flexible. So if you don't need the trip, you don't need the app. When you do need the trip, it's there for you in that zone. Also, very important note, this trip is within the zone, but there are several approved external stations. So if you can operate anywhere within the zone, but if you need to go outside the zone, you have to connect to another mode of transportation at an approved connection point. Any questions about our Jones-Ortiz family getting to Walmart? Okay, next slide. Okay, this time we want a day trip. Dad has to plan a day trip with the kiddos. Mom's working Saturday. So we're going to again use microtransit because we live in a microtransit zone at Laurel Bay. But in this case, we're going to take the microtransit zone down to an external approved location at the Food Line. The Food Line is an external approved location because that is a mega stop or super stop. That is one of our mobility hubs. So we will allow our microtransit passengers to get to any of our major mobility hubs that's closest by that zone. So the Ortiz-Jones family will ride to the Food Lion. They will pick up the red route, so make a transfer to a fixed route red route, and they're going to ride that just to the bike share station at Port Royal, where we just got the approved extension of the Spanish Moss Trail that's under construction now. So they're going to ride their bicycles down to get a bite and go to the playground, get those bikes turned back in, and make that return trip. So all in, including their fun for the day, the transportation to get there, and the fun and enjoyment was about 1:45. So they would then make that return trip home. So important statistics about this trip, you can see that they would use this for recreation, but they could also use that for grocery shopping if there was something at this location they needed, and they could continue that trip into the downtown if that was their preferred destination as well. Any questions about this connection of fixed route, bike share, and microtransit for our family?
I don't have a question, but I'm gonna have to leave, so
Yes,
let me
sir.
just get this in. You talked about the park and ride.
Yes, sir.
I would love for you to consider a park and ride to Honey Cow.
We have a connection there. So what we have done is our shuttle, our seasonal shuttle would come all the way back to Beaufort Town Center, which would be a negotiated major hub for the system, which has parking that is very underutilized. And that shuttle would take them all the way out to Honey Island, but it does have 5 locations.
Check this.
Yes, sir.
The county has about 2 acres of land, pretty close, about 3 miles from Honey Island.
Okay.
Well, once you consider that with the space,
Sure.
we would have that area as a
Sure.
parking lot future.
Yeah, that would essentially become a stop on that shuttle route. So yeah, we'll absolutely incorporate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
If we don't have any questions about the Jones Ortiz family, I'm going to move on so we can get you through all of our personas. Next slide. All right, if any of y'all have worked closely with our team, you know that Justin is my right hand in designing all these. So he got a shout out. Justin relies on his bicycle. So Justin is living near Shell Point with his family. He relies on his bicycle to get to and from all of the places that he needs to travel, but he's been trying to get downtown to the university campus, and it's a long drive. So he's going to take his bicycle and pick up the green route, which he's then again going to take to the Food Lion and make a transfer to the red route, which is our fastest Revo Road route. He's going to ride that route all the way to the downtown. He's going to alight the vehicle, get his bicycle off the front, which they have bicycle carriers, and he's going to ride it to the campus. On the way back, he doesn't need to be as fast. So he's going to take the slower of the 2 routes, the green route. On his way back, he's going to ride his bicycle down to the Beaufort Town Center, and then he's going to ride that route home. So just a classic transit trip using 2 routes, but incorporating that bicycle so that he can make those first and last mile connections. The beauty of the flexibility in his bicycle is that he can go downtown for a bite to eat. He can stop by the library. He has that flexibility. This route will come every 30 minutes. This route will come every 60 minutes. So if he misses this one, he can pick this one up and get home. So he has redundancy in that system that helps him to get where he needs to go rapidly. Any questions about Justin's trip? All right, next slide.
One about the bicycles, if they have to park their bikes to get on something and leave it at a location, how do you make sure it's secure?
That's a really great question. At all of our mobility hubs, we have cited bike racks. And then the vehicles themselves have bicycle carriers on them. So they're able to carry the bike with them for the most part. And then where they're going, that would, be up to them when he gets to the university. But there's always advocacy programs when you have a really strong bicycle community to make sure that those are spaced and comfortable locations throughout the community. But each of the trailheads have bike rack facilities. The hubs are recommended to have bike rack facilities, and that would be in the phase 1 rollout. And then long-term, those big mobility hubs can have enhanced infrastructure. Bicycling becomes a really strong component of the system. We've even seen in some communities lock boxes for them if it becomes something that's really important to have kind of the double-decker lock equipment on it that you see so frequently in places like Amsterdam. You're actually seeing them in the US in certain communities. Did that answer your question? Great. All right. Introducing our commuter club. These folks are tired of driving their vehicles, and they have some buddies who don't have access to a vehicle, and they are trying to get throughout the region and need a method of travel. So this is our van pool program / carpool program. It is a very scalable system. It's generally operated through a third-party operator. One of the largest in the region is they use their fleet of vehicles to supplement and augment as needed to provide those vehicles to our van pool and carpool riders. So the local community provides a stipend, an amount of money they'll pay per vehicle with a minimum number of riders. So we have our commuter club number 1 that's coming from 3 different locations. So they're a carpool, and they're going to meet up in Port Royal at our little location, travel to the van pool, somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes to get there. Otherwise, it's not incentivized to them, and they wouldn't likely be a cluster. They get to their agreed upon van pool meeting area, and they can travel anywhere in the designated region to get to work, as long as their starting location is within our community. We're trying to get our folks to employment opportunities wherever they need to go. They get vouchers for gas, they get vouchers for maintaining that vehicle, and it is a volunteer driver who clears all of the requirements in order to be the driver of that vehicle, so it keeps our costs very low. We're providing essentially a group trip, a group vehicle. We're subsidizing it They pay the remainder of that, which is far cheaper than owning and operating a personal car, and a really great entrance opportunity for those that don't have a vehicle that can't get to these employment opportunities because they don't have a way to get there. Very scalable, easy to implement, and easy to shut down if it doesn't become a successful test pilot.
The other people who drive their car to where this van is, where would you, for safe parking for those people?
So it's a really great question. And the beauty of the van pool is that it is all up to them. They agree on where they're going to drop their vehicles off. They agree on where they're going to keep the van. And so the driver is responsible for the van. Where it's being parked, it typically is located at their home. And then the pickup and drop off location for the other vehicles is completely up to that van pool and carpool. The goal of this is absolute flexibility. Because when we start putting parameters and rules and requirements on it, then it becomes not the intent, which is absolute maximum flexibility. We just pay a stipend towards it. The insurance and the liability is on the third-party operator and not on us. So we let them handle it. It's just access to a vehicle. Any other questions about this one? Okay, next, our commuter club. We're looking long-term. This commuter club is trying to get to work via ferry. So now we have a new ferry service. It's our marinas at Port Royal in this instance. So we've got various home locations. They're getting to this pickup location, the marina, and then taking it to this one location, but there are various areas throughout the region that are designated for those marina stops. But this is just to demonstrate to you how you could potentially use the blue route to get to Port Royal, to get on the ferry, and then to ride to that location, or use your personal vehicle to get from the home to that marina to get throughout the region. Really rapid service, really great service. You're avoiding the log jam on the highway system that we all find ourselves in when we're traveling regionally. A few more steps to get this implemented, but it absolutely has been considered as part of our design, so that when and if the service does become implemented, it's seamless with our transit services and our flexible services.
Is it passenger only ferry?
That's up for you all to decide. We're trying to transport vehicles.
Yeah, once they get to Hillhead, they got to find a place. Somebody's got to pick them up.
Absolutely. So we have been discussing that internally. It's outside the scope of the Northern Beaufort study, but we have discussed it. They're going to Savannah. Chatham Area Transit is there, and that's an easy solution. But if they're going to areas like Hilton Head that don't currently have a robust local transit service, that would need to be invested in, because it wouldn't be successful otherwise unless it's a tourism-based trip and they have alternative modes of transportation. Any other questions about the ferry future? All right, next slide. In this scenario, we've got Bob and Sue. Bob and Sue really trying to get to Bridge Club on Wednesday. Bob lives further out. He lives near Frogmore, and he is in a microtransit zone. He's also ADA paratransit eligible, which means he has mobility limitations. He's called Palmetto Breeze. He's filled out the form and it's been approved. And now he is eligible for a little additional services. So he'll use the app. It'll come to his home, but instead of dropping him off or making him connect to a fixed route system, he can if he'd like to, and it's cheaper if he does. But if he would like to use that system to get all the way to the library, it will externally drop him at his requested destination because he is ADA eligible. And that is based on mobility limitations, and it is more expensive to use those services because it is more direct. So once he gets to the library and enjoys his bridge game with his partner, he's then going to be able to board the downtown circulator and get to coffee afterward before he schedules his trip home. Pick him up directly from the coffee shop and take him back home near Frogmore. Sue, on the other hand, she lives in town. She's living at the senior apartments that are close to the skate park. And she is going to be eligible for what's called ADA paratransit from a fixed route. So you see this buffer that exists on either side of our blue route. That means that the vehicle will deviate, or a specialized vehicle will go to her location on a pre-scheduled trip. So on Monday, Sue knows she wants to get to the library on Wednesday. On Monday, Sue is going to call the dispatcher and she's going to say, I'd like to be picked up from my home at 9:20 so that I can get to the library before my bridge game that starts at 10. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to schedule my pickup trip at 1:10. because I want to be back home by 1:30. I want you to pick me up by 1:30. So that little bit of wiggle room in there. So the two of them meet up using very different methods of transportation, 24-hour advance reservation minimum. So she scheduled it on Monday. Advanced reservation only requires about 20 minutes here, but we're ADA paratransit, so it's going to take us a little further. We're going to meet up for bridge. We're going to both board the ADA accessible shuttle because it can have a wheelchair lift or ramp, and drop us both off at Coffee to enjoy it together, and then use our methods to get back home. So our active seniors were able to get to Bridge Club and have coffee together, and just required very different but somewhat similar tactics to do that. Any questions about Bob and Sue? All right, next slide. This is our last guy, Jaden. He's just trying to get to the beach and stay out of trouble. So again, Jaden is living with his family nearby the green route. So he is going to walk to the nearest pickup location, which is about a quarter of a mile from his home. He's going to board and ride to our transfer location, which again is the Beaufort Town Center near the Food Lion. That is a super stop. So our shuttle will pick up at that location. It has 4 other stops along the way and take them straight out to Hunting Beach. It arrives 6 times per day. That's how often the shuttle will run. So he's taking the morning shuttle, and he's going to take the second to last shuttle home because he needs time when he gets back, which is about a 45-minute drive, to get on the green route to get home before the service ends at the end of the day. So a little bit of pre-planning for Jaden, but an easy transfer and trip out to the beach, very affordable. And he has options. If he wants to leave a little earlier, he can. If he wants to leave a little later and has flexibility on the other end for transportation, he can.
Do they have rights for service? Can I get a start?
Yeah. That's a really good question. I know, right? Can we get their words on there? That's a really good question. We'll have to cost that in. All right, next slide. Implementation, so how to make any or all of this happen. Next slide, Melanie. Number one, it relies on strong local financial partnerships. There are very few, everyone says, what about grants? There are very few federal grants that don't require a local match, and all of them have a ceiling. They have a cap. So if we go beyond that cap, it's 100% local. And what I love about federal grants, and I'll show you in a couple of slides, is that you take the revenue off the top before they start paying it. So if you say, well, fairs will have too, they do, but not if you aren't fully maximizing your federal grant. So local partnerships are critical. We can't move forward to step 1 without them. We have to have dedicated champions to lead implementation, both on the staff side as well as on the government entity side, and those that are really communicating with the public and helping them understand the benefit. Prioritizing those development strategies. If we keep having developments coming online faster and faster that are not accommodating for transit vehicles, I'm going to share with you all on our ride around. We rode every one of these routes and made adjustments based on things that we found in the field. We could not get through the hospital property. We wanted to enter and service the front door of the hospital and could not do it. It was not possible, even with our smallest vehicle that we were operating. So if we don't have transit-oriented development, we can't provide good service to areas that are even the most critical and vulnerable. Leveraging technology is a game changer, but it requires investment and education. If someone says, I don't want to do an app, I just want to get on the bus. They did not leverage the game changer for them. The app is better. The app is faster. The app is smarter for them. It's better service for them. So making sure that we're educating on those game changers for this community instead of treating them as these barriers. And then last is delivering services that people want and will use. Year 1 builds trust. So really being smart and picking the things that we're going to see the most value in, so that those that could potentially make or break the future success of it say, no, I rode the downtown circulator. It was great. I got to leave my car. I jumped right on. It was easy. I rented one of the bicycles. It was fantastic. So sometimes those who are the most vulnerable are not those that are going to make or break the system. So being really smart about those initial investments to make sure that we've got real champions in the community.
Come back to the hospital. The come out of Breeze shorter bus couldn't make it through.
We couldn't navigate through.
Okay.
We do actually go in there. It is not. I'm not a big fan of it. No.
I can talk to you later, but what recommendations?
It's a tough one. I mean, Rivo Road is so tight, so congested, so spoken for.
I mean, if the hospital, I wonder if they could make accommodations.
It may be. I mean, there might be a way to work with the hospital, and of course it's Beaufort Memorial, so it makes it a little easier. It's not
Yeah,
Beaufort or
it's only
something.
public hospital.
Christine, and she all freaked out because they have to wait for the traffic to clear to make the turn safely. So now you're risking a rear end on Rebo while you're waiting to go in, and then of course you're congesting the traffic a little bit in a very short driveway. It was definitely not designed for transit. Now, the micro transit for ADA would go there.
Yeah.
And that'd be easy. So that as is would be good. So that'd be an immediate benefit.
Thanks.
All right, next slide. We are going to go into exhaustive detail, but of course, everything isn't going to happen year one. You typically don't see the first rollout of Wheels on the Ground for at least 18 months, and that's assuming you have all of your partnerships and all of your finances ready to roll. So we know Brian and his team have been working hard to tee you up for that. Typically, the first 12 months are secured for procuring equipment, making sure that you have those areas to store vehicles, investments like bus stop signage and permitting, all of those really important big lift items that are required to roll that first bus out. And so then in your next full calendar year, hiring and training the staff, making sure that we're integrating with the existing services of Palmetto Breeze, and then starting those implementation, the actual vehicle services. 2028 to 2030, we've completed our first year of service. Now we're gathering information, making adjustments, initiating phase 2 of expansions. If we were not able to implement the full suite of recommendations year 1, we would now be implementing those year 2 recommendations, continuing those long-term strategies to make sure things like ferry don't completely fall off the table. So there's still that planning happening in the background. And then beginning transit supportive infrastructure projects. We're going to start building in that phase. And then updating your TMP. By that point, everything we've done is now outdated because now we have new homes, new businesses, new travel experiences that need to be accommodated, and the system needs a good, healthy checkup at 5 years. Really important note about these first 3 years, a holistic growth for ridership takes 3 years. So if you're trying to gauge the success of the system in the first 6 months, you're doing yourself a disservice. So you really want to start looking at the success of the system at that next TMP update. Of course, making sure that we're working in a positive direction, but not feeling like you need to hit a specific target in the first 6 months, 12 months, 24 months. And then 2031 to 2035, confirming those partnerships and securing that for those big long-term investment projects that you've been pushing towards through those first 5 years. And then initiating the 2030 TMP recommendations, because you started planning all over again and adjusting the system and making sure that it's dynamic and changing as your community changes. Next slide. Your typical funding sources, fares, directly generated funds. So if you're putting vending machines at your super stops, that's directly generated revenues as well. Your local funds, local match funds, perhaps your state aid funds, and then federal assistance. This is your primary funding source. That's both for capital and operating. Your traditional funding sources from federal are, you'll hear a lot of 50s, 5307, 5311, 5339. That 50 number is dedicated to transit. 2 of those are formula funds. You're going to get those based on your population. Those are your funds, but you still have to apply for those. Your 5339 is discretionary, but it's a much larger pot. So if you wanted to build a major facility, those would be the applications you would need to be putting in order to support your local initiatives. We just got a grant application approved for a community a little bit larger than this one for about $39 million for a major multimodal hub for their system. So lots of resources in 5339. It can also purchase vehicles. So that'll be an important one. Uses and limitations, they all require local match funds. So if you don't have the match on 39 million, you're not getting 39 million. So you have to have at least a 20% match for capital and generally a 50-50 match for operating. And that is after you take off revenues. So a little bit of a fun exercise here. If our system costs $3 million and we brought in $100,000 in fare revenue, then that gives 3 million gross. That's how much we need to operate our system. Take away the fares, now we've got 2.9 million. That's our net. But our federal grant's only $1 million, up to $1 million. That means we have to have 1.9 million locally in order to operate that $3 million system. So every one of these federal grants will have a ceiling, and you'll have to make up the delta of that with your local funds, local partnerships. Next slide. So we have broken down each of those recommended strategies and show you the short-term, midterm, and long-term costs. The details of this are in the draft report, so this is just an exercise to demonstrate what that potential cost could be. There are a lot of variables. You all could say, well, we want to push fixed route bus and paratransit out by a year to midterm, and we want to just do these smaller micro mobility options first. That would absolutely impact your short-term cost. But generally what you would see is around $1 million because there are variables. If you say, well, I don't want to do the 24-hour advance reservation microtransit, well, those are rural funds. That's a different pot, so that'll change that revenue number. Well, I only want to do urban services. Well, that's another pot, so that's a different amount of money. So making sure that your revenues are matching up with the strategy. So we say about $1 million and what you're likely to see for federal funds in this area. Year one, that would be used for capital only. If you don't have vehicles, you can't operate vehicles. If you don't have bus stop signage, you can't implement a bus stop. So making sure that year one, you're using all of those resources for that 80-20, purchase the vehicles, purchase the equipment, and then year two in your short term, preparing for the rollout of services. So you can see that your fixed route and paratransit services, that's that buffer on either side where they'll deviate and pick you up. About 1.5 million, and that is gross. Downtown circuit, that's annual cost. Downtown circulator, 345,000, give or take, and that is all year round, 7 days a week with reduced schedule on Sunday. The beach shuttle is only scheduled for 4 months out of the year. That's $104,025. Microtransit, 1.6 million. And then the van pool program we've pushed out into the midterm, but it is very affordable. That is a pilot program with 4 to 5 vehicles, and that is only the local match portion. And then the bike share program is probably the most affordable recommendation because that is also very scalable. This is considering 60 bicycles and their associated docking stations. That would be 5 docking stations at $106,000. But again, you pick 2 locations and that dollar amount would go down. So again, estimated federal about $1 million, depending on which scenario we choose to move forward with for implementation. So you reduce those $140,000 in fare revenues, and you see you have a net of $2.5 million if you implemented most of those solutions day one. That would require those local partnerships to pick up the delta. And so there's more power and more partnerships. The more local governments join together, if you divided that essentially evenly by 3, it's under $1 million for each. And I really love this little trolley. We recognize and we costed that you all would like to see something a little more wonderful and a little less modern. So those cost estimates for capital do include a trolley-based system. Next slide. The next step in discussion, I'm rolling for me. Really short slide. Join us for First Friday, please. We'll have lots of information and some fun exercises. We know we'll be competing with vendors, but I promise we'll make it fun. Addressing comments from you all. Really great comment about the county property. We'll make sure there's a stop located there, as well as from the public, and those will be incorporated into the final report. There will be a draft report with a placeholder for public involvement, and any adjustments we need to make will be included, and then present the plan for final adoption or acceptance. Happy to answer any questions y'all might have. I know that was long and we're over time. Yes, sir.
When will the draft report be built for distribution?
Next week. So we're finalizing it. I hoped it would be finalized yesterday. We're in the final graphic tweaks, pulling it out of our graphic designer's hands. So we'll be circulating it next week.
Will it be on the low-cost site?
I hope so. Yes. Yeah, we'll have it published there. Yes, ma'am. All right. Thank y'all so much. I look forward to hearing your feedback.
Thank you, Mitchell. Okay, thank you. Okay, right before you for selecting our next meeting agenda. Our next meeting is on November 21st, and it's the last meeting of the year, as we normally don't meet in December. You've got a list here of potential topics. Or anything that you'd like to add to the list of topics, or just last meeting of the year?
Mr. Pappas, for November, we have lined up a presentation by Kevin Sullivan, the county transportation planner. He's going to give us an update on the corridor studies that are recently been completed or are underway in northern Beaufort County. So we do have a speaker for November, and that should,
For another item.
I think so, I think that should probably do it for November. We could be thinking about January.
All right. Anything else for discussion? Okay, without objection, the meeting is adjourned.